Benzo withdrawal symptoms. Hi, I'm Kirsten, Sobriety Bestie. This video is about benzo withdrawal symptoms. I'm specifically going to be sharing with you benzo withdrawal symptoms that I experienced when I was on Klonopin and coming off of them, and also in general some other benzo withdrawal symptoms. So before we dive into the benzo withdrawal symptoms, I want to talk about why we might, what it's like to even become dependent. What are the timelines for this? How can we think about benzos in the actual scientific way? Because I didn't know any of this information when I got on benzos. I was lied to, I guess, or misled or misinformed. Maybe my psychiatrist didn't know the truth. He told me benzos are not addictive and they actually do have a high tendency to dependency, right? And everybody is different. So this might not be your experience at all. Research shows that 3 to 6 weeks, even at therapeutic doses, that are associated with physical dependency on benzodiazepines. So in just 3 to 6 weeks. Everything that I've looked at, I'm not a doctor, by the way, I've just done a lot of research on this because I wish that there had been a video like this when I was going through my benzo withdrawals, where someone just told me the straight talk truth on it, so that, because my brain was frazzled, I couldn't concentrate. So I want to put all the information here just for you. So this is super informative and educational purposes only. All right. So yeah, benzos ideally are used for a couple of weeks, not long-term, because of the dependency factor and because of the benzo withdrawal symptoms that can come with them. 15%, roughly 15% to 44% of chronic benzic users, this could be even taken as prescribed, like me. Chronic means a long time, right? It doesn't mean abusing benzos, it means just consistent use. So 15 to 44% of chronic benzic users can lead to moderate to severe withdrawal symptoms. And after 6 months of benzo use, consistent benzo use, about 40% of the people on benzos in this specific research group had moderate to severe withdrawal symptoms. So 60% of the people had relatively mild symptoms if they stopped suddenly. So not everybody's going to have benzo withdrawal symptoms. In fact, most people won't, but there are a lot of us who will. So if you're watching this video because you're experiencing some symptoms and you want to understand benzo withdrawal symptoms better, welcome. You're definitely not alone. Or maybe you're watching this video because you're supporting somebody who's coming off of them. And the other stat is 10 to 25% of people who have used benzos extended, like me, I used them for 2.5 years, will have withdrawal symptoms longer than 12 months. And so there are examples of benzodiazepines are like Xanax, which is also known as alprazolam. Don't quote me on how to pronounce this. Valium, which is diazepam. Klonopin, which I was on, which is clonazepam. And Ativan, which is lorazepam. So these are examples of benzos. They have, some of them work faster and then last shorter. So Klonopin, when I took it, it took about 30 minutes to hit me and it lasted about 12 hours. And that's why I took it twice a day. I took it in the morning and then 12 hours later in the evening. The idea was it was always in my system. There are different phases of withdrawal that I want to discuss too before we get into the actual benzo withdrawal symptoms. So there's immediate withdrawal, which this varies with the drug life. So the drugs have a different half-life depending upon how fast acting they are. They're gonna have a different withdrawal, immediate withdrawal symptoms, right? Some of them hit us faster and wear off sooner. So there'll be different withdrawals for those. So they vary. And this is the rebound effect. And so for me, this was anxiety and insomnia. And some of these, interestingly enough, some of these withdrawal symptoms can occur while we're still taking the medication in itself. So if we skipped a dose or if we build up a tolerance, we can experience the benzo withdrawals while we're still taking the medication. Or we experience the benzo withdrawals after we get off them or as we're weaning ourselves off of the benzos. Acute withdrawal lasts typically around, we're talking 5 to 28 days. And for some people, this could even be months. Then there's protracted withdrawal, which is PAUSE. So post-acute withdrawal symptoms, PAUSE, like an acronym. And so some of these are insomnia, anxiety, poor concentration, loss of sex drive, depression, mood swings. And so the research that I did for this video, aside from my own personal experience, is specifically from a couple of sources. I've linked them below, some of those sources. Also, I recommend, and I've linked it below, it's a free book. It's Kindle on Amazon. It's called The Ashton Manual by Dr. Heather Ashton. It's known as the Ashton Manual. It's called Benzodiazepines, How They Work and How to Withdraw. So I'm summarizing a lot of what I've learned from that specific book. She ran a benzo withdrawal clinic for 14 years. So a lot of the research that went into her book and that I'm sharing with you in this video is from what she saw from her clients over those times as they were going through their benzo withdrawal experience in her actual clinic. There are 5 major effects of benzodiazepines. So in order to understand the symptoms and why we have the symptoms, it's important to look at the mechanism of what the benzodiazepine does in the brain. So the 5 major symptoms, the first one is anxiolytic. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, but it reduces anxiety. So number 1, it reduces anxiety. Number 2, hypnotic. So it has a relaxing and calming effect on the body. Number 3 is it's a muscle relaxant. 4 is it's an anticonvulsant. And 5 is it's an amnesiac. It has an impairment of memory. Those are the 5 main effects of benzodiazepines. So the symptoms of coming off benzos are gonna think of it like almost the opposite of those. So right away we know because it has an anti-anxiety effect, an anxiety calming effect. One of the effects that we'll notice as one of the symptoms of coming off benzos or weaning off benzos or forgetting to take our benzo pill would be anxiety. That was certainly for me. Like if I forgot to take one of my Klonopins, either at nighttime because I was out of town, for me specifically, maybe too drunk and I forgot it, or whatever the reason, if we don't have, or we run out of a prescription and we don't have it refilled, if we forget a pill, like for me in the morning, I would have a rebound of anxiety, especially also if I drank a lot that night before, I'd have a rebound of anxiety because benzos and alcohol work on the same neurotransmitter in the brain. It's working on something called GABA, which is a very calming effect on the brain. And so when we calm it down, think about it like, this is the way that I think about the balance in the brain. Think about a swimming pool. Like if you have a beach ball and you push it down into the pool, the rebound effect is it's gonna pop up, right? And then it's gonna balance out. And so I think about benzos the same way, and alcohol for that matter, because it works on GABA in our brain. So when we drink or when we take the benzo, it has that calming effect on our body, so it calms us down. And then the rebound effect that we get is it pops up, right? Just like that beach ball popping out of the pool, we have a rebound effect where we feel a little more frazzled. I share my story. I'll post it up here, my story of coming off benzos and what that was like. But just to stay with this analogy right here. So we calm down, we pop back up, and if we get off the benzos, we're gonna be going like this for a while, right? We're gonna be like kind of frazzling up here until our brain kind of like calms us back down and comes back down to here. That's essentially called homeostasis, when our brain is excitatory because it has been that calming, and our brain is regrowing, the synapses, there's neuroplasticity, our brain is balancing right back out, and we're coming back down here. So they told me in rehab when I got off the benzos that it was going to take a long time to come to homeostasis. The excitatory stuff that we're experiencing, the insomnia, the anxiety, the irritability, calms back down to our resting baseline. And the amount of time that's going to take and where our baseline actually is are going to vary person to person. So how long that's going to take to come down and come back down to homeostasis, right? That beach ball landing back on the water and not being pushed down and not being popped up. It's going to vary based upon our genetics. Our nervous systems all have unique histories. We've been through stuff. We've been through different levels of healing from the stuff we've been through, whether that is big T or little t trauma. We might be neurodivergent. We have divergent neurology. So we might have ADHD, ADD, autism, any sort of thing that makes us naturally prone to being more stressed out, more anxious, more dysregulated. So our baselines are going to vary person to person, but we all have that room to drop down to our baseline. That's our freedom, really, essentially. And I believe that with our baseline, we can probably even lower it with more work, right? So if we're doing those calming techniques. But anyways, what we're talking about here is that rebound effect that we get when we're either forget one of our benzo pills, when we're tapering down, right? So when we taper down off benzos, we're pushing less on that beach ball, so it's going to pop up a bit, right? So we're going to be experiencing these withdrawal symptoms as we taper, as we come off completely, until we get back to that baseline. Some of the typical benzo withdrawal symptoms are muscle tension, muscle spasms. I mean, we have that calming effect on our muscles, so the opposite is that muscle spasms and muscle tensions, insomnia and nightmares. That certainly was my experience, having the insomnia, anxiety, and panic attacks. I certainly had a lot of anxiety attacks when I was coming off of benzos. This is not everybody's experience. Now, my nervous system has had its own journey, right? So I was bringing my entire past, plus all my alcohol experience. I drank for 17 years. And so I brought all of that. And plus I was on the Klonopin for 2.5 years. So I had all of that history when I was at my journey of tapering down, right? And if you've seen my story, I'll post it again up here, my story about coming off benzos, you'll know that I was also in rehab. They put me on Neurontin and Trazodone. This is not medical advice, this is my experience, to help me with that homeostasis with my brain to come off the benzos, because I went off benzos in 10 days. A lot of people come off benzos in a year or a year and a half of slow tapering. I did a fast taper. That was what I wanted. I'm not recommending that. This is like literally just what I did in 2009. And so I didn't understand any of this. I didn't understand benzo withdrawal symptoms. I had no idea about any of this. And it might be a mystery to you right now, you know, and I'm so happy that you're here for this information. If you're learning all this stuff, that's like super cool. Okay, so some of the other symptoms, like epileptic seizures, in some cases, like it could be medically very dangerous to come off of benzo. That's why I say, like, seek medical advice. Hyperventilation, social phobia, depression, obsessions, rage, irritability. I certainly had personally a lot of irritability, poor memory, poor concentration. For me, it was very, very hard to concentrate. I had a very hard time, I'm not sure with the memory so much, but with concentration. Like I would literally, I think I was about 9 months sober, and I was trying to work, and it was super hard to focus at my, like, I felt like I was unemployable for a long time because my brain had a hard time concentrating. And so I would set a timer for 15 minutes. And my rule was I'd set my phone for 15 minutes and I had to work for 15 minutes without stopping. So no looking on social media, no going to the bathroom, no drinking water. I just had to focus on work, and then the timer would go off. And then if I needed to use the toilet or get water or stretch or whatever, I would. And then I put the timer on again. And I would slowly would train my brain to work in these 15-minute increments because it was so hard to concentrate. I also started meditating, which also was very difficult, but I started with 2 minutes, just closing my eyes and focusing on my breath. Even if I opened my eyes, my rule was I can't stand up. You know, I could open my eyes, I can look around, but I'd set my timer for 2 minutes, and I just wanted to practice concentrating. So my practice for concentrating was on my breath. Intrusive memories are another thing that people experience. So these symptoms are going to vary by person. So you might have other things like headache, pain, stiffness, fatigue, muscle twitches, tics, electrical shocks. So I had this it felt like these zaps in my brain, which was so weird. It's weird to remember this because this was so long ago. This was in early 2010. So I was about 6 months off of benzos. And I remember I'd be walking down the street in San Francisco and be like, I'd feel like my brain would be like, bzzz, you know, and I'd feel this, it felt like this electricity inside my brain. And I don't know what that was. I don't know what, it did feel like, well, we can call a brain zap, right? And so is that my brain rewiring? Is that the wires being crossed? Is that new things happening? Is that, I don't know what that was, but that's something that I experienced, is that it felt like there was the electricity in my brain was doing things that were new and I had never experienced before. And that lasted a couple of months that I went through that. Also tremors or convulsions. And upon reflection, for sure, I experienced that where I was in rehab and holding paper, and for 2 hours I was going like this until they gave me Ativan to calm my coming down of Klonopin, which is another benzo. And that's what the doctor there did to help me with the convulsions and the shaking. And not everyone's going to experience this, and all of them, tinnitus. I did not experience tinnitus, that ringing of the ears, but a lot of people do. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. So there could be all different effects. I'd say for me, the biggest benzo withdrawal symptom that I experienced was anxiety. I mean, that's why I took benzos in the first place, was because I was so anxious. I had that car accident on the freeway going 70 miles per hour. A month later, I had a panic attack, reliving that car accident in my head. And from then on started my general anxiety, my panic. This is why I went to the psychiatrist. I just felt anxious all the time. And so I got on the benzos. And you know what is so interesting, looking into this? I did not know this literally until this week that I've been doing this research on benzos to make these videos for you, for my channel, for you specifically, right? You watching this, that it's relevant for. I had agoraphobia, which is fear of leaving the house. And I had never connected the dots on this until doing the research. Dr. Heather Ashton, that I mentioned, the Ashton manual, or her book, Benzodiazepines, How They Work and How to Withdraw, that free Kindle book that I recommended earlier. You can get that, I'll link below, right? In that book, she said that 20% 20% of the people in her clinic that she ran for, that in the trial, like the 14 years that she ran this benzo withdrawal clinic, 20% of the people in her study, in her research, experienced agoraphobia after they got on benzos. I'm like, boom, mind blown, because when I was agoraphobic, which means afraid to leave the house, like literally how I experienced it, I would be terrified to leave the house. Like sometimes I'd wake up so anxious and I just going outside seems scary, right? Even if it was to get more alcohol, which I knew would calm me down, or something that I needed to do, like I would freak out, and I would legit was taking my psychiatry appointments via phone at the end instead of going in person because I was agoraphobic. And so I would go to reach for the doorknob and my whole body would freeze, like fight, flight, freeze. I would freeze and be unable to pull the door open, like to turn the knob and pull it open. Like legit frozen, afraid to leave the house. I always chalked that up in my own brain. I didn't tell anybody about that at the time. I always had a lot of shame around it. I just felt like something was broken in my head, that I was fundamentally flawed somehow. Something was broken in my head, and it was because something was wrong with me. And I didn't take it much further than that. So if that's where you're at right now, that's BS. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing broken in your head. It's not possible to be broken. Like who and what we really are is unbreakable. Like we are energy inside the body, right? Like we are unbreakable. There can be, glitches in the system, so to speak, or something with our neurology that we can fix. There's room for us to change our brains and to rewire our nervous system. Like the wiring might be a little off and we can rewire ourselves. And so 20% of the people in our clinic developed agoraphobia after they got on benzos. So if you're agoraphobic, it might be, according to this research, it's linked to being on benzos in the first place. If you developed it after coming on benzos. My experience getting off benzos is that I'm not agoraphobic anymore. And I went from being afraid to leave the house to, a couple of years later, overcoming this, going through the benzo journey, walking the warrior walk, as I've talked about in one of my other videos about coming off benzos, right? What my experience was. But I went from afraid to leave the house to choosing to move 8,000 miles away to an island, right? I moved from San Francisco to Bali, Indonesia, and I've been living 8,000 miles away from my home for the past 8 years. I essentially, especially that first 2 years, decided to be a digital nomad, not really have a home, travel all throughout Southeast Asia working from my laptop. And I used to be afraid to leave the house. I used to freeze at the thought of leaving the door. And I went to a place where I actually chose to have a lifestyle where I didn't have a door to freeze behind. What I'm trying to say here is there's a lot of freedom available to us. As we go on this journey of coming off benzos and embracing our symptoms and healing from our symptoms, we can actually have this whole other world open up to us. We are not stuck in this place. We can come through. I'm not sure how much freedom is available for you, but there is a lot more than where you are today. If you are in that journey where you are experiencing those benzo withdrawals, or someone that you love is, there is a lot of freedom available to us. Our brains can rewire. And if you're like me, you might have the zaps or the anxiety or the insomnia or the lack of concentration, but that's not my experience of life today. That's not where it leads to when we do simple practical steps to rewire ourselves. And let our brain will naturally heal itself, right? So we pushed it down with the benzos over time, it will pop up, we'll be more frazzled, and we will come back to homeostasis. There's a lot of things that we can do to help our brain come back to homeostasis. There's a lot involving moving our body around. Obviously, moving our body, exercise, movement, yoga, stretching is really helpful for neuroplasticity. Our diet, what we eat, the nutrition, the supplements, that what we put into our body is going to help our brain regrow, right? Now, this isn't a video on supplements. I'm not an expert in that. I don't have the information to give you there. But what I'm saying is whether or not we move our body, whether or not we put nourishing foods into our body, how we engage with our arousal, that activation, that, and when I say arousal, I'm talking about it more in a scientific term, right? In sobriety bestie world, arousal is the activation of our nervous system. This is not, I'm not saying arousal in the sense of a lot of people think of it as sexual arousal, and that's true, but arousal in general is more than that. There's a physiological arousal, or it's autonomic arousal of our autonomic nervous system. That is the frazzledness that we feel, the anxiety that we feel, the irritability, the mood swings. That is, we are aroused. There's a lot going on. We are not calm. We are not having those effects that the benzos gave us. So there's a lot that we can do, not just with the movement and the nutrition, but with changing our relationship with arousal. That's what I did. I changed my relationship with the arousal. So that means with my emotions, with my anxiety, with my feelings, with everything I felt inside, with physical pain. I needed a new relationship with my arousal. My relationship with my arousal before was, I feel uncomfortable, let's drink. I feel uncomfortable, let's put a benzo inside. I am anxious, let's put a benzo inside. Now, I'm not saying that that was wrong or bad, or if you've done any of that or doing any of that currently, that is wrong or bad. Alcohol absolutely saved my life. When I was 16 years old and I started drinking alcohol, it calmed me down in a way that made me be able to function. Now, why I was so dysregulated is a story for another video, and I will share that with you at another time. But alcohol absolutely saved my life, and benzos really helped me too. What I really want to say here is that I was misled by my doctor, who said benzos are not addictive. He said you could be on an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, like Paxil or something like that, or be on benzos, which are not addictive. And so to calm my anxiety, to help me with the panic that I was experiencing, panic attacks from that car accident. So I chose benzos because I was told they were not addictive. It's not true. There is, on both of them, there is something to come off of. Now, you might want to stay on benzos forever. That's between you and your doctor. I'm just here really in this video to talk about the symptoms. And so because I was taking benzos, because of my anxiety, because of my panic, because of my inability to be able to be with what's in my body, that was my experience in getting off them. I had that anxiety from before. So not only did I have the rebound effect of coming off benzos, I had a rebound effect of coming off alcohol. I had very little coping skills for dealing with my arousal, dealing with my emotional world, everything inside of my body, all that activation. I didn't know how to be with my arousal or how to navigate it. I had very little, like zero to little coping skills of how to face my arousal. I also had unaddressed trauma. I had been through, my nervous system had been on a long journey, had been through a lot of stuff, and I hadn't healed a lot of that yet because I had just used benzos and alcohol to like kind of cover my pain, to mask myself, to like regulate everything. And also, I think that I'm a human who tends to be a little more dysregulated than average. So I also have a nervous system that's probably more dysregulated than what's typical. Like I have like an atypical nervous system in that sense. And that might be where you're at too, you know? So that's like genetics. So we're all coming from different places when we meet this world, and we're all gonna have slightly different symptoms. They tend to be like the opposite of whatever the effect of the benzo was, the opposite is the withdrawal symptom. And over time, those even out. We get that homeostasis. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I hope you are enjoying this Benzo series that I'm creating for you. And really what I want you to know is that there's freedom. If you want to know, by the way, if you want to know those the practical steps that I did in order to calm myself down and calm my nervous system down, there are very practical steps that I did to learn how to face my arousal and change my relationship with it and calm myself down, to calm my anxiety, my stress, my arousal, my emotions down immediately and set myself up for the long term. This is stuff I've been teaching for over a decade. I got sober in 2009. I started teaching this stuff in 2012, like in a business. And so I have a roadmap I call it like the roadmap to freedom. It's the arousal roadmap essentially. And if you go to sobrietybestie.com/roadmap, you can get it. It's a PDF you can print out. Plus there's a video that explains everything to you. This is what you can do if you're super activated. It's gonna help certainly with some of the benzo symptoms. I definitely think you need to, not medical advice, work with your doctor, but you are also probably likely gonna need a lot of coping skills in order to calm yourself down on demand. Like this is the stuff that if I had known, I didn't know even how to research this back then. And there were less people weren't talking about anxiety on the internet in 2009. It just wasn't the culture. There was still so much shame around it, and now it's like just normal. It's what we go through. Like life is hard. And sometimes when life is hard, we reach for things to help it be less hard, right? Like alcohol, benzos, whatever. You've been through a lot of stuff. I've been through a lot of stuff, like we all have. And maybe you've been through more stuff than most people. And this is just a journey, like I call it like an autonomic adventure. Like it's our autonomic and nervous system is aroused It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. Nothing is broken with you. There was nothing broken in my head. My autonomic nervous system was frazzled AF. So my journey has been like developing a new relationship with my autonomic nervous system. That is part of that nervous system is the fight or flight response, right? Where we get super activated, and it's about calming it down. So get the roadmap if you want some of my practical steps on how to do that. Leave any comments you have below. I hope you have enjoyed this video. And wherever you are on your journey with helping somebody else who's coming off benzos, learning about this for a loved one, or your own journey of coming off benzos and facing benzo symptoms, I just wish you lots of peace and freedom. And I want you to know that there's a lot of freedom available for you. I'll see you in the next video.